As you know, the LINQ data context class automatically generates SQL code to retrieve information from the database. Using the LINQ data context class, it's also possible to send SQL code directly to the database. The SQL code you'll use in this lesson is very simple and won't be difficult to understand. A SQL expert can extract absolutely any data from a database using SQL code. To begin this lesson, open the Stable Base project from your Sample Files folder. And open the code behind file of default.aspx. Now let's examine the LINQ query in the Timer News Tick event handler. This event handler updates the news items on the page. You wrote this code in Lesson 8.5. You're now going to replace the LINQ query with manually written SQL code. Remove the line var news items equals data.news.select and replace it with var news items equals data.execute query string select news text from news. This code sends the following SQL query to the database. Select news text from news. This SQL code retrieves all of the news text values from the news database table. It will work identically to the LINQ query that it replaces. Note that you must specify the data type that the SQL query will return for each row. In this case, you have specified string because the news text field contains string data. SQL queries can return more complex record sets. For example, you might run a query that returns customer forename and customer surname values. In this instance, the query would return a collection of objects that have two string properties. You couldn't use execute query string to extract this data. The best solution in this situation would be to create a new class named customer name with customer forename and customer surname properties. You could then call execute query customer name to return a collection of customer name objects containing the values you need. A quicker but less professional approach would be to specify a tuple when calling execute query. You learned about tuples in Lesson 2.1. Note that if you want to send SQL code that doesn't return a result, such as an insert or update command, you can use the execute command method of the LINQ data context. Now let's test your code. View default.aspx in your web browser. Your SQL query is executed successfully, and the news items are displayed. Note that it is best practice to avoid this approach. All SQL code should ideally be stored on the database itself, using stored procedures. Placing SQL queries in your C# code makes it difficult to understand and maintain your data access code. It may also make your application vulnerable to SQL injection attacks. You'll learn about SQL injection attacks in Lesson 9.11. Close your web browser now and close Visual Studio. You've now completed Lesson 9.4. Send SQL code through LINQ.